The parade ground trembled with the rhythm of boots striking earth, 100 cadets moving as one, their voices rolling like thunder as commands echoed into the bright morning air. Dust rose from the ground, the scent of metal and sweat mixing with the sharp tang of polish from brass buttons and buckles. Every uniform gleamed, every step snapped with precision, a display of discipline meant to impress the officers who watched from the sidelines. Elena Kruger marched among them, her chin lifted, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She was younger than most in the ranks, her beauty almost out of place among the hardened faces around her. Beneath her cap, strands of chestnut-brown hair brushed her cheek when the wind caught them, but she held her posture firm. Her boots struck the dirt with practiced rhythm, her shoulders squared, her arms swinging in perfect time with the others. From a distance, she blended into the formation, another cadet in a sea of gray and green. Up close, however, the eyes that followed her told a different story. The whispers began soft, carried like static through the lines. She won't last. Wrong place, wrong girl. How did she even get in? Cadets didn't speak loudly. They never risked being caught by instructors, but the smirks and sidelong glances were sharper than words. A lieutenant at the edge of the ground let his voice cut through the air with deliberate cruelty. Enjoy it while it lasts, Kruger. This isn't a parade for pretty faces. A ripple of low laughter followed, thinly disguised as coughs and murmurs. Elena felt every word settle on her shoulders, heavy as lead. Her heart beat fast under her pressed jacket, but she forced her steps to remain steady. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, willing her face into stillness. Expressionless, untouchable. If she faltered even for a second, they would see it, and she would not give them that satisfaction. Even the instructors, lined up like statues, seemed to look past her, their eyes sliding over her as though she were an error in the roster. No correction, no recognition, just indifference that stung worse than ridicule. She was here, standing among them, but treated as if she were invisible or worse, unworthy of being seen at all. Her chest tightened, her breaths shallow beneath the weight of the formation. She could feel the heat of shame pressing against her skin, threatening to crack her composure. Memories of endless drills, of nights spent practicing until her muscles burned, pressed against the sneers she heard now. She remembered the blistered palms, the bruises hidden beneath her uniform, the discipline she carved into herself when no one was watching. All of it dismissed with a glance. The command rang out, sharp and cold. The lines shifted, boots thundered, and Elena moved in sync, refusing to fall out of step. Every motion was precise, but inside her chest, the sting of their words burned like fire. She told herself over and over that silence was her armor, that dignity was in endurance. Yet the whispers followed her like shadows across the parade ground, daring her to break. Still, her face remained unreadable, her steps unwavering. To the others, it might have looked like nothing more than obedience. But within Elena Kruger, beneath the polished surface, the quiet pressure built an invisible storm that was waiting for the moment it would finally be seen. The inspection moved down the line with the steady inevitability of a storm, the commanding officer's gaze sweeping over each cadet like a searchlight. Boots clicked against gravel as he advanced, hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp and unyielding. The cadets held their breath when he passed, chests puffed out, uniforms stiff, every seam and crease meant to prove their worth. The morning sun caught on polished buckles and glinted in weapon barrels, but the air was heavy, filled with the unspoken fear of being noticed for the wrong reason. Elena Kruger stood rigid, her pulse hammering beneath her collar. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed every stance, every salute, until her body responded without thought. And yet, as the officer drew closer, she felt the weight of the whispers that had dogged her since dawn pressing harder against her skin. A smirk flickered across the face of the lieutenant who had mocked her earlier, as if he already knew what was about to happen. The officer stopped in front of her. For a heartbeat, silence stretched thin, fragile as glass. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept over her frame. His jaw tightened. Then his words fell like a blade. "Cadet Kruger, you are dismissed. You lack the discipline we require." The sound was louder than any shouted command, louder than the crack of rifles or the thunder of boots. It cut through her chest, through the air itself, leaving only silence behind. The formation around her stiffened, but then the snickers began, hushed at first, leaking through clenched teeth until a ripple of laughter spread like poison. Some turned their heads away, others didn't bother hiding their satisfaction. To them, it was confirmation of what they had believed all along, that she didn't belong. Elena's body locked in place. Her throat burned as if the words had lodged there, unmovable. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to scream that she had earned her place, but the weight of authority pressed down too heavily. She forced her arm upward, hand trembling as it reached her brow in a salute that was meant to be steady. Her eyes blurred, but she did not let a tear fall. She would not let them see her break. Lowering her gaze, she turned, each motion mechanical, practiced, but hollow. Her boots struck the ground as she stepped out of line, the sound sharp, echoing through the parade ground. Each step was a wound carved into the silence, a reminder that she was no longer one of them. The line closed behind her, seamless, as if she had never stood there at all. No one moved to stop her. No one spoke her name. The officers remained expressionless, the cadets stiff with false indifference, but their silence was louder than mockery. It told her she was utterly alone. She kept walking, her eyes fixed on the far edge of the field, where the grass met the shadows of the barracks. The ground seemed endless, the distance stretching longer with every step. Her career, her dream, all the years of struggle and sacrifice that had led her here unraveled with each strike of her boots. She carried herself with the remnants of dignity, but inside her chest, humiliation smoldered like fire. She wanted to scream, to demand why, but she knew the answer they had already given. She was not enough. And so she walked toward the edge of the field, her back straight, her face unreadable, as if by refusing to break, she could hold on to at least one victory. But the truth pressed in with every step. Her journey was ending before it had even begun. The parade ground held its breath as Elena's boots carried her further from the formation, each step louder in her own ears than the marching thunder that had filled the air minutes before. She kept her gaze forward, her jaw tight, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. Shame pressed against her skin like heat, threatening to break through the mask of composure she fought to maintain. The silence was suffocating, filled with the weight of judgment from those who had already decided she didn't belong. Then it came sudden, unshakable, a voice so deep it seemed to rise from the earth itself. "Iron Wolf, stand by." The words rolled across the field like cannon fire, shattering the silence, echoing off the barracks, and rattling the air in every chest. It was not a command shouted by an instructor. It was something else, something older, heavier, spoken with the authority of blood and battle. The cadets flinched, their rigid lines faltering for the first time that morning. Whispers that had once flowed freely through the ranks died instantly, strangled by shock. Heads turned in unison toward the source, eyes wide, as if they had just heard the voice of a ghost. Elena froze mid-stride, her breath catching in her throat. The words struck her like a lightning bolt, the name she had not heard in years pulled from the depths of memory and thrown into the open. Her pulse surged. For a moment, she wasn't on the parade ground at all. She was back in the snow-laced mountains, the roar of wind in her ears, the echo of gunfire in the dark. That name, whispered once in fire and smoke, was now carried into the morning sun by a voice that knew. Out of the watching officers and cadets, one figure broke from the line. A Marine in full dress uniform, broad-shouldered and scarred, moved with the measured stride of someone who had long ago stopped fearing judgment. His medals caught the sunlight, each one a story of survival, of sacrifice, of battles that most of these cadets could only imagine. His face bore the map of war, scars carved deep into his cheek and jaw, his eyes steel gray and unwavering. He walked forward, boots striking the ground with deliberate force, every step cutting through the tension like a blade. When he stopped, he stood not before the commanders, not before the instructors, but directly in Elena's path. Then, with a precision that silenced even the whispers of doubt lingering in the air, he raised his hand to his brow. The salute was crisp, unflinching, a gesture reserved only for those deemed worthy of honor. His eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, the weight of years fell away. Elena's throat tightened. She could not move, could barely breathe, the sting of humiliation suddenly replaced by something she could not name. Confusion, disbelief, and a spark of recognition burned in her chest all at once. Why here? Why now? Why would a decorated Marine, this man marked by battle and respect, address her by a name no one in this place should have known? The cadets shifted uneasily, their confusion thick in the air. Officers exchanged sharp, questioning glances. The parade ground that moments before had treated Elena as nothing more than an error now turned its full attention to her, every gaze caught between suspicion and awe. The Marine's voice carried again, lower this time, but still strong enough to echo across the field. "Iron Wolf," he repeated, the words not a question, but a statement carved in stone. For the first time since the dismissal order, Elena's eyes lifted fully, meeting his. The name rang inside her, unshakable, undeniable. And though her lips did not part, her silence carried the weight of a truth no one else could yet understand. The balance of the field had shifted. Something had been set in motion. The cadets who had laughed now stood rigid, uncertain. The instructors who had dismissed her felt the authority of their ground slipping away. Elena stood suspended in the space between disgrace and revelation, her breath still caught in her chest, her future no longer closed but suddenly wide, blazing, and dangerous. The Marine's boots struck the ground with a rhythm that silenced even the birds perched on the flagpole above. Each step was deliberate, heavy, carrying the kind of authority that could not be rehearsed or assigned. It was earned in places where survival was never guaranteed. The parade ground, moments earlier filled with stifled laughter and careless whispers, now seemed to tremble beneath the weight of his advance. Cadets who had mocked Elena stiffened, as though the sound alone might expose their cowardice. Officers exchanged uneasy glances but did not dare to move. He came to a stop before her, close enough that Elena could see the deep lines carved into his face, the scars that told stories without words. His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unflinching. Not the gaze of someone seeing a mistake, but the recognition of an equal. His voice broke the silence, low and gravel-edged, yet strong enough to roll across the entire field. "You earned that name in the mountains, don't you forget it." The words struck her chest like a drumbeat, pulling air from her lungs. She stood rooted, unable to speak, her throat burning with the pressure of unshed emotion. The name Iron Wolf was one she had carried in silence, born of a past she had believed buried beneath layers of sweat, drills, and ridicule. To hear it spoken here, in front of those who dismissed her, was like a wound torn open and lit by fire. Yet it was also something else, a reminder that she had not been invisible, that someone, somewhere, had seen what she carried and refused to let it be erased. The Marine turned his head then, his gaze cutting toward the officers who had condemned her. His voice hardened into steel, each word like the report of a rifle. "Dismiss her? You don't even know who you're training." The accusation hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. The commanding officer, who had so confidently declared her unfit minutes before, shifted under the weight of those words but said nothing. His silence was its own admission. The cadets stood frozen, their earlier arrogance shattered. Those who had laughed now stared at Elena, as if seeing her for the first time, their smirks erased, their pride wilted into something that looked uncomfortably like shame. Whispers tried to rise again, but none dared break the tension. Awe had replaced mockery, and though not one of them understood fully what had just happened, they knew the ground beneath their feet had shifted. Elena's chest rose and fell, her breaths uneven, but her posture remained unbroken. She did not thank him, did not speak to defend herself, did not even lift her trembling hands. Instead, she met the Marine's stare with steady eyes that glistened, holding back the storm within her. She understood now that her story was not over, that this moment was only the beginning. The Marine gave a single sharp nod, the kind soldiers share when words are unnecessary, then stepped back. His presence had altered the air itself, leaving the field charged with something heavier than fear: respect. As he turned away, the silence he left behind was absolute, but it was no longer empty. It was full, alive with the knowledge that the cadet they had dismissed carried a legacy they had been too blind to see. Elena remained still, her boots planted firmly where shame had once tried to drive her away. The weight on her chest did not vanish, but it no longer suffocated. It fueled her, a fire rekindled. Her dismissal was no longer a scar. It was the opening chapter of something larger, something none of them could yet imagine. And though she spoke no words, her silence carried the force of a vow. She would not be erased. Not here, not ever.